So we go through specialization, technology, institutions, record keeping, and what you start seeing are more advanced cities. You start seeing groups of cities coming together. So all of this is happening as a direct result of the agricultural revolution. So we get from this to civilization. It's a progression that you really want to spend some time on so you understand it. One of the things that was mentioned in your book, and some of you talked about, wasn't there a mountain in the middle of this city? It was called a mountain of God. That's an expression, all right? But the ziggurat was a huge temple. This was used for worship. There were a lot of priests that were part of this system of religion, and it was very central to their lives. When you see something like this, that is this detailed, that is this formal, that spent obviously a lot of time to build with rules of architecture that come into play, you know that religion had to be a very important focus of their lives. The last thing that I want to look at with you, and the last of your big ideas that we talked about in class, is cave paintings, looking at the meaning and the significance of cave paintings as a form of art. Now, if you wanted to go out and watch more of the video that we looked at in class, which is absolutely fantastic, the name of the series is How Art Made the World. And I believe the name of the episode was The Day Pictures Were Born. In terms of how interpretations of some of these things develop, Altamira, make sure you remember that because it's an important place. Altamira is in northern Spain. When the discoveries were made at Altamira by a 9-year-old daughter of kind of an amateur archaeologist, people did not believe that these paintings were old. They thought it was a modern hoax because they were too good. And the general notion was that prehistoric man could not have had culture, could not have developed art. This was something that was a completely foreign concept to people at the time. And for the man who really put forth these ideas that these things were real, Marcelino Sanz de Sotolo, whose daughter was the one who discovered them in the cave when she was with her father one day, it was very sad. It was very sad. I mean, he was completely discredited. Nobody believed it. They were too good. A lot of the paintings were of extinct animals. You'd think that would have given them a clue that maybe they weren't modern. But, you know, it's hard for people to let go of those preconceived notions sometimes. So this idea that, you know, prehistoric man had no culture, had no art, persisted until the discovery in Spain of the cave at Lascaux. Or it's actually a series of caves, a lot of paintings there. And what people began to realize was that these were very old. And they were very sophisticated. And prehistoric people did have artistic expression. Now, in terms of why, how and why they were interpreted differently, with Lascaux, they tried to date these, or they were dated. And they started looking at when these actually might have been made, and that really started to change people's perceptions. Also, the fact that these were found very similar images so far apart from each other would seem to indicate that these were not done by people in modern times. So that was a big difference. Now, the traditional interpretation, which is the one in your textbook, is that these are all hunting scenes. These are supposed to give them luck in terms of finding animals. These are scenes of plentiful game animals so that, you know, they'll find lots of food and all of this stuff. But there are a couple of problems with that. The first one being that the animals that are depicted in the paintings were not the animals they were eating. So they might have been drawn bison. They might have been drawing woolly mammoths, but they were eating deer and goats and things like that that would have been a little bit easier to catch. So that's the first problem. One of the other problems is that scattered across many of the images are a series of dots and lines and grid patterns that really didn't make any sense because we don't have an alphabet, and what do these things represent? We don't really know. Now, in looking at what happens in the brain, and to kind of sum this up in like the Cliff Notes version, in primitive societies, when you would have shamans go into a trance-like state where they feel like they're actually dying, they're going to another dimension. When that happens, and there's a demonstration in the film of this using some people who live in Africa, I believe. What happens is that you're seeing the spots and the grid patterns in these things, and some of you have actually told me that you can see where that might be. If, for example, you're staring at the sun and you close your eyes and you see spots. Somebody told me today that when you lay in bed at night and you're on the verge of sleep, you see spots. And it's always the same kind of seemingly random patterns. But what that tells us is that the way the modern brain is wired is the same way that the prehistoric brain was wired. And that these have spiritual significance or spiritual implications. Why have these views changed over time? A lot of it has to do with the fact, I think, that it's a lot easier for researchers to share information. It's a lot faster to look at discoveries that have been made all over the world. We've talked before about the kinds of things that scientists are able to do now with Google Maps, with looking at archaeological sites. Exchange of information happens so fast. That did not used to be the case. It's never been as fast as it is today. So as they can share ideas and as we have more technology available to simulate some of these things with the brain, in particular experiments, we can see that these particular images that are on the paintings are things that happen with modern humans. So, in terms of what does it all mean? For meaning and significance of cave paintings, we know they're not painting animals that they're eating, so it's not related to hunting. We know that some of the images of humans that are added to the paintings have animal-like characteristics. You might have a person depicted with an animal where the person has similar hooves to the animal and similar hair. And we know that these are not everyday images. They're not painting what they're seeing in everyday life. We know that the images are not at the beginnings of the caves. They're way in the back, buried, very difficult to get to, very tight spaces. They're kind of hidden. This is very important to them because it's not something that they're seeing every day, and they're not painting what they're seeing every day, and maybe they're not always even painting three-dimensional objects if we're talking about light patterns and grid lines and spots and things. So, as more technology is available, as scientists are more and more able to share discoveries, as more research is done on the human brain, which we still honestly don't know that much about, we may find out even more. But this is where we are today with this research, and it's getting us more and more away from this idea that they're just painting up that they're trying to kill and eat.